Understanding how many soldiers fought, were wounded, or died in the First World War can be overwhelming. Focusing on just one soldier gives the war a human face and reveals its traumatic impact. One of the most helpful types of historical evidence for exploring the experiences of individual soldiers is the personnel record, or what is referred to as a service file. William Henry Metcalf was a young American-born signaller who served in the Canadian Expeditionary Force during the First World War. Examining his file brings his story to life. It provides us with a biographical sketch that reveals important evidence about his enlistment, medical history, training, transfers, promotions, injuries, finances, and more. In an era before computers, these administrative files were how the government and army tracked men from enlistment through to the end of their service. Bits and pieces from personnel records also provide valuable insights into the battles that took place during the Allied offensive, now known as the last 100 days. Taken together, these fragments contribute to our understanding of how soldiers experienced the battles. They also gave insight into how the Allied offensive unfolded during the last 100 days. There are 5 steps for analyzing primary sources. The 5 W's: context, exploring, reaching conclusions, finding proof. We begin with Metcalf's Attestation Paper, one of many different types of documents contained in the personnel record. What kind of document is it? Who wrote it? When and where was the document created? Why was it created? An attestation paper was a military form used to determine a soldier's eligibility for service. It shows what information the government required from a soldier when he volunteered or was conscripted. The legal component was filled out by a magistrate, the physical description by a medical officer. The final approval was given by the unit's commanding officer. The war broke out in August 1914. Canada, bound by its status as a British colony, went to war because Great Britain was at war. Metcalf enlisted in September 1914. Like many of his fellow soldiers, his attestation took place at Valcartier, Quebec, the site of a new military training camp. William Henry Metcalf was 19 years old, an unmarried barber, 5'6", with brown hair, brown eyes, and a dark complexion. He was born in Waite, Maine, a short distance from the border that separated Maine from New Brunswick, on January 29, 1895. Or was it 1885? Why would an American choose to serve with the CEF? The United States did not enter the war until 1917, but that didn't stop 40,000 Americans from joining the Canadian ranks. Many were British subjects living in America and felt obligated to fight. Others were horrified by Germany's invasion of Belgium and wanted to do their bit. Still others sought steady pay or simply adventure. Americans weren't alone in this. Men of many nationalities fought in the CEF, though unlike Metcalf, most were living in Canada at the time of enlistment. Whatever his reasons, Metcalf's signature affirmed his consent to serve with the CEF. He made an oath to be faithful to the King and obey all orders from his commanding officers. Following a medical examination, he was deemed fit for service and was assigned to the 12th Battalion. He was later transferred to the 16th Battalion before embarking for France. He arrived on the Western Front on May 14, 1915. Context helps us to situate primary sources in the time and place in which they were created. As a member of the 16th Battalion, Lance Corporal Metcalf fought in many of the decisive battles that helped end the war, beginning with the Battle of Amiens. On the misty morning of August 8, 1918, the Canadian Corps and other major Allied armies struck a powerful blow against the enemy lines. The Germans were shocked by the attack, and especially by the massed tank assault and heavy artillery that supported the infantry. Though some German units collapsed in the face of the attack, others fiercely resisted. Metcalf was among the tens of thousands of soldiers at Amiens. His training and bravery allowed him to contribute to the Allied victory. In the first wave of the attack, Metcalf set up a temporary signal station to maintain a steady line of telephone communication between the front lines and the battalion headquarters. Amid heavy enemy fire, he ventured outside his posting several times to inspect and repair damaged lines. At the end of 3 days, the Allies had advanced roughly 22 kilometers and captured thousands of Germans. Field Marshal Sir Douglas Haig said the victory was the finest operation of the war, while German General Erich Ludendorff called it the Black Day of the German army. The German soldiers were struck a severe blow, but they did not fold. In late August and early September, the Allies continued their offensive. On September 2nd, they assaulted the Drocourt-Quéant line, one of the most formidable defensive systems along the Hindenburg Line. The DQ line, as it was known, protected Cambrai, a critical transportation hub. Lance Corporal Metcalf and the 16th Battalion were among the first to advance against the DQ line. They faced heavy machine gun fire, which forced them to wait for tank support. When a tank caught up, its crew didn't see the battalion. Metcalf jumped up from the shell hole in which he was hiding, rushed forward, and waved his signal flags. He pointed his flags toward the enemy trench that the 16th was responsible for taking and directed the tank to fire. Metcalf was hit by enemy fire, but he kept going, leading the tank along the trench line. The assault moved forward again, and the German trench was captured. It was one of many that day that contributed to the smashing of the Drocourt-Quéant line. The victory came at a heavy cost. Canadian casualties included almost 6,000 dead and wounded. Metcalf was among the injured and was forced to seek treatment in hospital for a gunshot wound to his right leg. Combing through Metcalf's service and casualty forms, we're provided with dates and descriptions of transfers, leaves, and promotions, as well as injuries and illnesses suffered during his time of active service. The level of detail is a goldmine for historians. It is a means to discover the war from the perspective of an individual. Closely examine the details, including key military terminology, abbreviations, and acronyms. Even though details are often recorded in a cursory fashion, we can trace an individual's path through the war. For example, we see that after Metcalf suffered the gunshot wound to his leg, he was transferred to Reading, England for recovery, then to the Canadian Red Cross Convalescent Hospital at Brexhill. He spent 173 days in hospital. This put him out of action during the final battles of the war. These files also detail honors and distinctions Metcalf received. For his actions during the Battle of Amiens, he was awarded a bar to his military medal. This was a gallantry award, and the bar meant it was his second time receiving the military medal, a rare honor. Even more noteworthy, Metcalf won the Victoria Cross for his most conspicuous bravery, initiative, and devotion to duty in attack at the Drocourt-Quéant line. The Victoria Cross was the highest military award available to British and Commonwealth forces. Of its 1,355 recipients throughout history, Metcalf was one of only 6 Americans to receive the award, 5 of whom did so for their service to Canada during the First World War. Consider how aspects of the last 100 days are recorded in the various files and forms of Metcalf's record. What can his files tell us about Amiens or the battle for the DQ line? What insight can they provide about the soldiers who fought there? At the same time, what do you find missing from the files? Remember that your analysis and conclusions might be based on select portions, slivers, and fragments of the larger collection of documents in the personnel record. We must compare and corroborate Metcalf's record with other primary and secondary sources to assess their validity and reliability. Explore the details in these records. Note the inconsistencies and discrepancies. Why might this have happened? How do these details match up with other primary sources, such as battalion war diaries, memoirs, and letters? Do other sources challenge your initial findings and interpretations? What questions do you still have? Over time, most individual memories, stories, and traces are lost, silencing much of the past. The primary sources that remain help shape our understanding of historical events. We can only work with the evidence that survives. For a historian, this means there is rarely a complete picture of the past. More often, we are given a window to look through, a glimpse into the bigger picture of history.